Professor Steve. Can I call you Steve or Steven? What do you prefer?
Yeah, Steve is fine.
Steve,
Yeah.
okay. I like saying professor. It's so cool.
I like hearing it.
So I just want to introduce you real quick. You're Stephen Asma, and you've written 10 books, not 2 or 3, but 10 books. You are a professor of philosophy. You have your doctorate in philosophy, is that?
Yes.
Okay. And also, I mean, you do so many things. You're also, you play blues guitar as a hobby. You're an illustrator. You love to draw. Mm-hmm. And you also, what am I missing? Author, blues guitarist. You're a speaker. You speak at events.
Public speaker,
Public speaker all the time. So I'm really honored to have you, and I'm really happy that you came in here. I was also a student of yours. You're a teacher as well.
Right.
Right. So I kind of think of you as like a Renaissance man kind of thing.
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
I went to a blues club about maybe 10 years ago to see my friend Pete. We have a mutual friend Pete Galanis, who's a local, kind of famous blues guitarist. And I go to see him at a blues concert, and I see you. And I'm like, oh, you're here just watching the blues, and then you get up on stage and you're soloing with the band. I'm like, what the? This guy's
that's funny.
Yeah.
I didn't remember that. That's hilarious. Okay.
Yeah.
You probably thought I'm just in the audience getting a drink or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pete's an awesome guy, and I'm sure we were playing a gig together. And you were there. Do you remember where it was?
It was right by Columbia, in that famous blues club.
Buddy Guy's Legends, probably. Yeah. Wow. That's great. Wonderful story.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, there's my teacher. He's probably here to catch up. And you get up and you start soloing, and you're good. And I'm like, his feel is really good. And I'm like, damn, I got to do something with my life.
Well, you're very kind, and I appreciate that. But it's really nice to be accidentally inspirational because, you were a student of mine, and as a teacher, you're always trying to get the students to get excited about this or that. But then, to be able to play at a nightclub and then to have your students see you, that they're like, oh, he really can play, Yeah. And that's really rewarding. And it was accidental in this case, but I'm glad it happened.
So, yeah, and it was a lot of fun. And I also wanted to talk about your class. I always remembered your class. I'm kind of an ideas guy. I'm an amateur philosopher, meaning that I'm not traditionally studied, but I like to read about it and learn about it. And I loved your class. We watched a couple of really cool movies. Your class was called The Philosophy of Film?
Yeah, Philosophical Issues in Film.
Right.
Yeah.
And we watched 2 movies that really stood out to me were Broadcast News.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, like an 80s flick?
Yeah, no one will remember that film, but I think it was an late 80s film. Okay. Maybe it was in the 90s.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the woman in that film was kind of dealing with what? Two relationships. And the other movie that I really liked was Crimes and Misdemeanors.
Oh, yeah. Woody Allen.
Yeah.
That's a great movie.
Yeah.
I think both those movies hold up really well, but they're kind of stuck in time. I think if you go back and see them, they're still really strong stories, but they feel like they were made in the 80s and 90s, too.
The pace maybe is a little slow.
Yeah, the pace is slow. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are great ones. I'm glad they stuck in your head.
Yeah. Good. So what was so interesting to me about Crimes and Misdemeanors, and I don't think we're going to give anything away, but the guy, it's a murder, there's a murder that takes place, and the guy who commits the murder hires somebody else to do the murder, and then he actually gets away with it, and he has to deal with the the conscience, and dealing with the having been brought up as a moral person, he kind of did this murder out of desperation.
That's right.
And he has to deal with those consequences.
Yeah, that was I think we watched that movie, and we also read some existential philosophy, Jean-Paul Sartre's existentialism. And I know that Woody Allen is a huge fan of existentialism. And it's like the idea, well, if God doesn't exist, and isn't there to punish you, then who punishes you for your crimes, and what makes something wrong and what makes it right. So a lot of his films are interested in that topic, and that main character is struggling with what he did, but it looks like he's going to get away with it. So in that sense, it's a really good film.
Yeah, because that's not, you don't see that in movies. Always the guy, anyway. So do you think they're going to continue to make movies like that? Do you think they'll do it on the independent?
Yeah, I think independent films still make philosophical storylines. I mean, Woody Allen, he's kind of been canceled in a way, because of his own personal life or suspicions about his personal life. But a lot of his films are very philosophical. I'm trying to think of who's making films like this now. They're still out there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they're hard to fund because there's no cars blowing up and there's not a lot of
Superhero.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think superhero movies have actually gotten more philosophical too. They've gotten better.
Oh.
But these quiet stories about personal relationships, that's going to be the independent film.
Right,
Yeah.
of course, yeah. And well, they're really cheap to make
Right.
now because of all the technology that's available. So it probably doesn't cost much and anybody can make them. So they'll continue to be made, but
Yeah.
yeah, the superhero movies are hilarious. My friend's totally into them. And I just, I can't get over sometimes. Like, I want them to make them a little more complicated, like you said, and a little more challenging to the audience instead of like, bad guy wants to kill the whole world and good guy has to stop the bad guy from killing the whole world.
Yes.
Like, oh my God.
No, it's true. I was talking to my class last year, or it was the year before, and I like some superhero movies, like all that Avengers stuff. A lot of people came in and started writing it much more smart sort of scripts. Like I think Josh Whedon, who had done all that Buffy the Vampire stuff, he came in and made the script more interesting and the characters more interesting. But I was saying to the students, I was like, this is a fairly juvenile worldview. I mean, good guy wins by destroying bad enemies and then gets the girl, or the girl gets the guy, and everything is resolved at the end.
Right.
And some of the students were like, no, don't say that. They were really crestfallen that I'd called it juvenile. But yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah. So I like when I'm challenged by a piece of art or film or even music.
Right.
I try to tell people sometimes some of the best albums that I didn't like right away. But I think nowadays that's kind of, people don't look at things like that. I think everything's so immediate. They want that immediate gratification right away.
That's right.
I also wanted to ask you something. Do you consider yourself kind of agnostic or atheist?
Yeah, I would say practically speaking, I mean, officially I'm agnostic, which means you don't know.
Right. It actually comes from the Greek, agnostos, right? Without knowledge.
Exactly, right. And so there's sort of two kinds of agnostics. One is like, I don't know and I don't care. And the other is, I don't know, but I'm still working on it, still interested in it. And I'm sort of an agnostic in that second sense. Practically speaking, I kind of live my life like an atheist, just day to day. But I'm open to the possibility that, of spiritual reality. I just don't find the evidence for it very compelling.
I feel exactly the same way.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, exactly. It's funny. I'm trying to get more debate on the show. Obviously I don't want everybody that agrees with me on the show, but I wanna, then we're just like, me too. But I was debating with a Christian the other day, and she was like, she basically made up her own. I think a lot of people in Western culture and in America especially think they kind of make up their own religions nowadays, where they take the things that they like out of the Bible and they don't take it as legitimate. Like, they don't really think someone lived in a whale for a certain amount of time or something. But are they allowed to do that, really, if they're calling themselves Christian?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. But there's really two traditions. Like, let's say Christianity in particular, but this would apply to Judaism or Islam too. That there are some people who are literalists, and they'll say, it really was 7 days, to make the world, and it really wasn't Adam and Eve. And there was a time when everybody was a literalist.
Right.
But then the science has advanced, and like the Catholic Church, for example, said, okay, after Galileo and the sciences, and eventually after Darwin, they were like, well, we're going to read these books as symbolically true. They're not literally true. They're more just like meaningful stories. And God gave us these to teach us lessons, but let's not take it as journalism or, as facts.
Right.
And so I think that is legitimate. That's what really I think in Christianity, that's what happened. That's been going on for the last couple hundred years. Some people argue that Islam needs this kind of softening approach.
Right.
Some people will say, well, Islam needs a reformation because it's too literal-minded about the scriptures. And I think it's probably good that people start to read these things more symbolically. But if you go to the Bible Belt in the U.S., people are more literal-minded.
Right. So, well, I guess it could get tricky because if you think that most of it's then stories and you kind of distance and you don't take it as literal, I think then the most important story could be not taken as literal. And the most important story is when the rock moves and he ascends into heaven.
Right.
And that's the most important, right, part of the...
It's a good point. If you take this kind of literary approach, then you're going to be like, well, that's just a story, too, that Jesus rose from the dead. And then you're not a Christian anymore, which is kind of a problem.
Because that's like the most important tenet.
I think the modern liberal Christian does this kind of picking and choosing, like you were saying.
Yeah.
I don't think it's illegitimate. But I think there are some things they're going to hang on to, like the resurrection.
Of course.
Whereas other things like Jonah lived in a whale, they're going to say, well,
Right.
it's off to the side.
Oh, and I also hear, whenever I debate with someone, they always say, oh, that's Old Testament. That doesn't count. I'm like, it's part of the Bible.
Yeah, it does count. And there's also wacky stuff in the New Testament, too. There's like the book of Revelation has all kinds of bizarre, sort of miraculous, supernatural stuff too.
Yeah.
But
Penn Jillette is a famous atheist, and he goes, if you want to become an atheist, just try to read the Bible. He goes, if you read it, it's completely unreadable. It makes it's very so I don't know.
I think the Bible is it's unreadable in the sense that the claims they're not logically or scientifically valid. But as mythology goes, it's pretty fun stuff. I'm sure I'm going to get hate mail on this, but the stories in the Bible are filled with like heroes and demons and Satan tests Job. There's some fun stories there.
Absolutely. And that brings me actually to the next question I had for you, which was you wrote a book kind of like the importance of religion in life. And I talk about this with a friend of mine. He's a Syrian and he was raised Christian. And, he says, some people, he tells me that I might be strong-minded enough to keep my morals without having an agent or God in my life, but a lot of people need that and the world needs that. And you did a discussion at the American Humanist Society or something, where you said, religion does offer very valid things in human life.
I think this idea that, there's an extreme version of it, which is you need religion in order to have morality. And I don't agree with that.
Okay.
I think you can sort of figure out with logic and reason what the right thing is to do.
I agree.
And if you have, you teach a kid like, oh, you hurt your sister. Well, when you're hurt, then you realize you want to do unto others as you would have done to yourself. You can figure that out as a kid. With
empathy.
with a little bit of help. But I do think there is this argument that even critics of religion like Karl Marx and Sigmund Freud, even Malcolm X to a certain degree, said, well, sometimes religion helps people stay moral because they're afraid of hellfire or they want to go to heaven or something. So as a social tool, it might be very valuable. And my own book, which is called Why We Need Religion, looks at that argument, and I'm not opposed to it. I think there's something to it. But I'm more interested in the way that religion helps us manage our emotional lives. Like it helps us deal with things like grief and sadness and rage and stuff like that. So I don't want to sound condescending by saying, well, uneducated people need religion. Otherwise, they're not going to do right. On the other hand, people who maybe haven't been well educated or life has been tough on them, maybe religion does keep them, from committing crimes or hurting people. It's kind of an empirical question. You'd have to see, I guess the way to do it is, all right, how many people in jail for violent crimes? How many of you were raised religious? That would be an interesting question, because if a lot of people in jail for violent crimes were raised religion, then that shows that argument doesn't hold water. That's not the check against violence.
That right. That'd be an obvious kind of correlation
Yeah.
there. Yeah. So that was kind of, and then, so I'll just tell you a little bit about what I think. Not that, I don't know if you'll be interested, but when you wrote also a piece called, is the coronavirus evil or doing the wrong thing? And of course, when I read your article, I totally agreed with what you said. Obviously, it is not evil or ill-meaning.
Right.
It's just a living thing, and it's trying to survive like any other living thing. Is that kind of what you were saying?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so I look at nature as a battle for survival. I look at human beings. We've kind of conquered a lot of things in nature, so we kind of forget sometimes that how powerful it is.
Right.
And we've built these houses. We've built communication systems. But these are all man-made things. I feel like they were kind of done in spite of, this mystical, religious, you know what I'm saying? Like, they didn't happen because of prayer.
Uh-huh.
They happened because of human sharing and ingenuity.
Yeah.
We were left here naked and afraid.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree.
In a brutal wilderness, and nature was trying to kill us at every second.
Yeah, it still is.
Right.
I mean, I agree with you. I don't think prayer is going to help you against the coronavirus.
No.
I do. So here's the distinction I would draw. I agree with you. What's going to help with coronavirus is medicine, is the humanistic tradition of science, looking at organisms and trying to fight them.
Yeah.
So, however, where religion would be valuable, I think, is, let's say you lose your mother to the coronavirus. And despite all of the best efforts of the medical community and your mother fighting, it just was the chance combination of underlying conditions, the virulence of the disease, just some failure of medicine at that point. And this happens to all of us all the time. We're losing our loved ones all the time. And it's not like religion or prayer is going to bring them back, but there's something deeply consoling about prayer and religion at that moment that really helps people to think, like, either the kind of simplistic version, like I'm going to see my dead mother again in the next life. That can just be what you need that month, to get back to your job or whatever it is. And even if we would say, well, it's not real, it's something.
But isn't that kind of like a survival mechanism?
Yes, exactly. I think it's part of the adaptive survival equipment that evolved in human beings. So just like tool use with our hands and equipment, I think religion is a kind of a product of cultural evolution. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is kind of a funny question, but I was thinking to myself yesterday when I was preparing for this interview, I was like, okay, so let's say we're agnostic. Okay. I come from the tradition. I love James Randi. Do you like James Randi?
Yeah, I like James Randi. Yeah.
I love James Randi.
Skeptic.
Yeah. He's the best. He's like one of my idols, But if you look at his approach, it's very pragmatic. There's no mysticism. There's no mediums. There's no talking after dead, to people after they're dead. There's no ghosts. There's no psychics.
Right.
And, so technically, I guess there'd be no life after death, right? The mind is a machine.
Right.
It turns off and it's off,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which is scary for a lot of people.
It is.
Because we always want that we're going to meet our loved ones, whatever, in the afterlife or whatever. There is some kind of afterlife. But so let's say we believe in that. That sucks. It's like, what's the plus for us? Like, to believe in that? What, in other words, what do you do? Like, we're right. Okay, so we're right. We think we're right. How does that benefit our life?
No, it's a good point. I mean, you look at James Randi and the whole sort of skeptical movement.
Yeah.
I think you're right. Some people could look at that and go, well, that's a bitter pill or a cold bath to have to take.
Yeah.
On the other hand, they if you look at those communities like online and like in their printed documents. And I was a member of the Skeptic community. I've written for a Skeptic magazine on and off over the years. They do have this funny kind of consolation where they do feel good about being right. Like that feels like, hey, if nothing else, we were right about this, so we didn't get duped. And there's a wonderful psychologist, philosopher named William James, who's one of the great American philosophers. And he says the skeptic, somebody who just loves science like Randy, is smart and has a very clear mind. But they have hopes and dreams out of the way they put the world together. And one of them is they don't want to be duped. They don't want to be caught up being the fool or playing the fool ever. Whereas the believer is sort of like, I'm willing to risk being wrong or foolish or being duped in case this is, real. And those are two different psychological profiles. So it's not like one of them is right.
Couldn't be the fear of being duped be almost stubborn though sometimes in a little bit?
It can be, yeah. It can be. I mean, one of the things, I tend to share Randy's worldview for the most part. On the other hand, you can't really prove a negative. You can't prove that there is nothing spiritual out there. All you can say is there's been no evidence so far. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, right.
So there's always, the religious person can always come in and go, yeah, but there's always this possibility. So you can't shut the door on it completely.
And my next question would be, what do you do with gratitude and love and conscience? You're saying, and is there a conscience? What is the conscience? The conscience is not something. And what is that love and gratitude? And what is the thing when you see on the screen, not just for your immediate family, but like the human family? You I don't know, like you see a beautiful movie or that touches you. What is that?
Well, yeah, I suppose the materialist like Randy would be like, that's like neurotransmitters squirting, dopamine and opioid, oxytocin and opioids in your brain. But yeah, the spiritual person sort of has a little bit of an advantage here because they can say, well, that's the soul or that's, the divine or something like that.
Soul is so overused,
that
word. Soul.
I think that the soul, if you think of the soul as like Casper, the friendly ghost inside the machine, you're probably wrong. There's no evidence that exists. But if you say some things like a really amazing movie that you've seen or an inspirational song or a great nature hike, or James Brown has soul, that means something. It means there's something going on here that's special, that's like not the usual humdrum song or movie. And it's a way of sort of framing out, like this stuff is like extra important, But that doesn't mean there's a metaphysical soul.
Right, right, of course. I think who's the creator of Skeptic? What's his name again?
Michael Shermer.
Yeah. He's an extreme kind of like where the brain, everything comes from the brain, right?
Yeah.
And I relate to that. I think. Obviously, I think, those are the tricky questions.
Yeah. If your brain is all you are, then you still can have a conscience, but it's going to be the way you were conditioned, like from a childhood up. You're going to have feelings that are negative if you do wrong. You're going to have feelings that are positive if you do right. So you have a sense of a moral code, but it sort of has to do with how your parents conditioned you.
You think so?
I think so. Because
so empathy has to be taught?
I think you have the seeds.
In other words, a kid can grow up and become like a killer without a conscience at all?
Okay, there's two ingredients, right? I think you have to have the initial ingredients, which is all human beings have, except psychopaths, which is you have the seeds of empathy.
Okay.
But then your parents or your initial caregivers have to train it up. They have to train you to exercise it. Just like a muscle, like a runner.
Right.
We all got leg muscles, but some of these people are really trained, and they got a little extra leg muscle, than the average person. Like Usain Bolt, there's no way I could train 10 lifetimes and never be as fast as him.
Right.
And so I think empathy is the same way. Like some people are very empathic right out of the gate, and other people have very low empathy, and it looks like serial killers, psychopaths have very low empathy.
Right. Okay.
So then if you train it up and you teach a kid to feel empathy towards somebody else who's in pain, they end up having a good moral conscience later in life. But it's not a miracle, it's not supernatural, but it does require some training, I think.
Yeah. One of my favorite, I talked about it on a podcast before, one of my favorite things of science versus, religion or prayer was like a little just experiment where two people, or no, one person's sick in a room and he has something that's easily curable by antibiotics. And he has two phones and one goes to the whole world can pray for him, right? And one goes to a doctor who just has a simple prescription of antibiotics that can kill these common diseases that everybody died from in the back. Which one would you choose?
Oh, yeah, it's an easy call.
Right. But it seems so, you'd think 7 billion people praying for you would help.
Yeah, you have to.
But it's such a simple, you know what I mean? I think of things. See, you know what I really admire about you is that you have good recall. You can bring up, great philosophers' names and quote them and stuff like that. I can't do that for some reason. I don't have that same kind of recall. I look at things very kind of simply. I oversimplify things. I'm kind of
that's fine.
Yeah, I know. I'm kind of like a deconstructionist. That's the way I like it. Once I get too into minutia, I get lost and I can't really deal with it. But that's another thing. I was thinking about memory and how important memory is to the human experience.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if we had a few 30 seconds of memory? We wouldn't advance at all as a culture.
That's true.
Because
there's a great movie on this. Did you ever see Memento? Yeah.
Yeah. That was great. So who are some of your favorite thinkers or philosophers? Who do you tend to think had a good perspective, even going back to the Greeks?
Aristotle is my man. And it's not because he didn't get things right. He was wrong about a lot of stuff. He didn't have science. I mean, he was but he was investigating. He was kind of a biologist before biology. I think he got a lot of things wrong, but if you want to see a great mind at work, Aristotle is the man.
Better than Socrates? Wasn't he a student of Socrates?
Yeah. Socrates taught Plato, and then Plato taught Aristotle.
Oh, right.
So that's the sort of lineage. And Socrates is oftentimes like the patron saint of philosophy, and he was a badass. As you say. But Aristotle,
he just kept saying, "No, I don't know. You can't make me know. I don't know."
I'm a huge fan, there's no doubt. But he wasn't interested in nature. He was only interested in people.
Oh, So Aristotle kind of led to the Darwins, kind of in the future.
Yeah, he was willing to look. Also, he was interested in people too, how does politics work? Why do we like certain kinds of art? But also he was interested in biology and geology and the heavens and all that. So Aristotle's impressive because he's like an encyclopedia set. There was nothing that he didn't, examine or think about.
Wow.
And then I like a lot of modern stuff too. I think Darwin, not a philosopher per se, but a huge game changer. Everything changed after Darwin, I think.
Was he more of an observer, just a stat? What was he like?
Yeah. He was a great observer of nature, but also he doesn't get credit for this, but he was great as a theoretical thinker as well, because he put together chance variation and natural selection. That's what gives us the kind of bodies we have, the kind of, even some of the psychological kind of competencies or capacities that humans have. And it changed, religion dramatically, because then we weren't the center of the universe. We were just an animal like other animals. And I like existentialism, like we were talking about before.
Really?
Yeah, Sartre, some of these thinkers.
Isn't it kind of hopeless, existentialism?
I mean, I see it in two steps. The first step is kind of hopeless because the universe is empty, and you have to do it all yourself.
Oh, okay.
But then the second step is, well, then you got to do it all yourself. No one's going to rescue you. No one's going to save us. We have to make our lives into the best thing we can and make the society the best we can. So there's kind of an optimistic angle on it.
And have you used that to kind of stay productive throughout your life as far as like writing all these books and stuff like that? It can't be easy writing a book, right?
Yeah. Writing a book is hard, although I'm the kind of weirdo that actually like enjoys it. So,
I know. I would think it'd be so relaxing and interesting and kind of like, I don't know,
Yeah, you feel like you've accomplished something too. Like each chapter, you feel like you've learned something. Every book is like almost like getting a different college degree, because I'll start something and not know much about it, and then like 3 years later, the book is done and I know a lot about it. Mm-hmm. So it is really fun. Although I despair about books now. I think books are kind of over as a cultural phenomenon. Because I was going to be like a handful of us who read books, but really,
I know,
podcasts, YouTube.
I read less too, and I used to love reading books. I don't know. I think it's the material too. I think once I find the right material, I get really, I really enjoy it. Like the last novel though I wrote was Unbreakable, but that story about and she's an amazing writer, and it was an amazing story.
He was like a prisoner of war in Japan, right?
Yeah. But even before, the guy has been through so much. Did you know before, when he was like lost at sea?
Oh yeah,
he was like
sharks.
Yeah, but before he gets captured, he's stuck in the ocean for like,
oh my God,
like 6. I don't know. I don't remember how long it was, but they were catching birds and eating them, and I don't know. It was just, this guy was basically, if you read that book, it's called Unbreakable. It's by the lady who wrote Seabiscuit. I forget her name right now. But anyway, that book held me. It held my attention.
Yeah, that's a good book.
Some books cannot. I've tried reading some books on the Kindle. I cannot. So I think you're right. I think it is kind of losing. Yeah. Everything's on the phone. Articles are very fast. Everything's sped up. And I was also thinking about, do you remember when, you obviously remember this, I'm not trying to age you, but you remember when music, it wasn't readily available and like you had to get an album.
Yeah.
Wasn't that cool?
Oh yeah, I do remember. Yeah. It was a whole cultural thing. Yeah, you had the album, you had the artwork, you put it on, you had the lyrics, you listened to it. My son is sort of in this phase where he's getting into the Beatles. And of course, we only listen to them like through iTunes, or we have Alexa play the songs or whatever. But in my head, I hear the next track on the album, because that's how I used to listen to the Beatles album, from the beginning to the end. And so I thought, God, isn't that weird? My mind is contoured to this old model where you had to listen to the whole album.
Oh yeah.
And it was this thing where you would try to sit and relax and. Maybe, you turn off the light, put the black light on in your room. There was this whole kind of way of relating to the music. And now I do think, young people do still have a very strong connection to music, but it's in these like bite-sized chunks.
I sometimes skip through the song. I don't listen to the end of the song. When I'm checking out new music, I should say.
Yeah.
There's so much new music. I'll listen to like 20 seconds. If I don't like it, I'm just, you get sucked
haven't even got to the chorus yet.
Yeah. So, yeah, I know what you mean.
But that's true. They have to front load the tune then, right? So it's got to be magic in the first 20 seconds.
It's got to be.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm doing a pop record right now, and even my producer of the record, he's like, the vocals have to come in the first 5 seconds. Literally.
Yeah.
Or else they're gone. The listener's gone.
No, we were listening to a Rush song the other day, and like 5 minutes went by, and I was like, "Oh, this is an instrumental." And then Geddy Lee's voice comes in. I thought that was hilarious. Yeah. You could never do that now.
Yeah.
Or at least,
Well, what's cool though is that records are still kind of cool. I think people still buy. People still buy records and vinyl, but CDs are done.
Yeah.
And some people are going back to cassette tapes.
Are they really?
Yeah, they want cassette tapes.
8 tracks next?
No, I don't know about that. I don't think you'd find the players, but some people want cassettes still. I don't know. But also the music has gotten more provocative.
Yeah.
But we thought stuff was provocative when we were younger, but I just don't see how much further they can go.
Yeah. That's true. That's like movies too. Movies are more violent, horror is more horrifying. Everything is amped up. Yeah.
So how can it keep going?
I think there are, yeah.
I
Something,
mean, it started at Elvis, and now we have WAP. Do you know what WAP
No.
is? Oh boy.
maybe that's best.
Look
I
it
don't.
up. Yeah, look
Right.
it up after
Okay.
the interview. I'm not
All
going
right.
to tell you right now, but it's like a #1 song.
Oh, okay.
And it's very, very like
Explicit?
shocking. Oh yeah, totally
Okay.
explicit, and it's by women, and it's for little girls to listen to.
Oh, gee. Wow.
You got to hear it. But anyway, we went from Elvis, which was shocking,
Yeah.
to like those
Elvis
kids'
with Elvis.
parents. Yeah, to those kids' parents, and now you have WAP, which I don't know how they're gonna go past WAP, but I guess they will. Because it's got to stay cool. Young people will
Yeah.
always want stuff that's fun and cool.
I agree, although there are these kind of like throwback subcultures, like the hipsters they started to sort of have okay, we're not going to be on our phones all the time. We're going to do things like handcraft the table, and you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, that's
we're going
true.
to build our own instruments and
Yeah.
learn to play the trombone or some shit.
Right.
Just, I think there is this kind of like always a kind of back to nature movement that happens when that stuff gets too intense and people
Okay.
want to break. So maybe that'll happen.
Yeah, and I think that is true. I think some of those skills are very valid too, like woodworking, carpentry. Those will never
Yeah.
get replaced by robots.
Right.
Plumbing, some of the hard skills. But I did see a special on 60 Minutes about the robot drivers of the semis. Did you see that?
I didn't see it.
Oh my
I know they're
God.
coming though, right?
Listen, they've logged hundreds of thousands of miles, and they didn't even tell people.
Oh, really?
They didn't tell anybody. And whew, they're doing really well. They can see things really well. They can even slow down when a car cuts them off. I mean, it's intense.
Were you optimistic after you saw this, or are you like worried?
Well, I'm not a truck driver.
Right. Well, that's
But I think it is worrying. I think Amazon is taking over the world. I think these companies are taking over the world. Me and my friends always talk about this. Once you're in that, aren't you in kind of like you're either Apple or you're Google.
Yeah.
You're in their, what's it called? That, not infrastructure, but you're in their system.
Yeah.
And I mean, how are you going to compete with Amazon when they have all the products and they get it to you in one day?
That's right. Yeah. No, there's always these movements to try to like keep independent booksellers alive or whatever, but there's no way
You're
to
going to sell a
survive.
$5 book.
Yeah.
Someone's going to walk in off the store, off the street. Retail is, I don't know what retail's going to be in 20 years. I don't know.
Yeah, especially after COVID. I wonder
Yeah.
how that's going to change. People have gotten even more accustomed to just having things brought directly to them, and drones are going to be dropping stuff to your house. That's already happening. Yeah, it's a brave new world.
Your music is immediate. Well, I think internet's just going to get more. Internet is going to envelop the globe, right? It's not there yet. I'm
Right.
sure there's still a lot of people who need to be lifted out of poverty. I don't understand. I don't know if this is something you're interested in, but sometimes I think about like infrastructure. Why countries still don't have like sewers and like basic infrastructure or electricity? I don't understand that. Maybe Africa's too big, or they don't have the money to do it. But I just look at like some of these third world countries, and I'm just like, why can't they just learn about how we did our infrastructure?
Yeah.
And kind of just copy it, or
I think that there's in each of these countries. I lived in Cambodia for a while.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And I've spent a lot of time. I lived in China for a while, and I do think there are people in those communities in those places that do just want to implement the success stories of other countries.
Yeah.
But the problem is that one, it costs a lot of money, especially at the beginning, the original outlay investment. And so sometimes a country will come to the rescue, like China does a lot of investment in Africa.
Yes.
They come in, they build these roads.
Right.
And in a way, I think their model is not that bad. It's a little worrisome, but
it's a give and take, right?
It's a give and take.
They take the resources
Exactly.
and they build the infrastructure.
Right.
But then someone's got to maintain it. They have
Right.
to.
And then the problem is corruption. Like if you go
Corruption.
like I was in Rwanda, and there's a guy there who grew up and he went through the Rwandan genocide
You
and
were in
everything.
Rwanda?
Yeah, it was amazing. But this guy was telling me, yeah, this was supposed to be our time, and he said, Because imagine if Africa united as a force, or even if the countries basically helped each other. This was his argument.
Yeah,
then it would be a huge world force. But he said corruption at the top level just skims all the money that's coming in from philanthropy and from the West.
What do they do with it?
Well, they just...
How much money do you need in a life? Are these people just like... I mean, we saw some of the mansions and stuff, right? That like Saddam had or something. Right. I mean, how many mansions can you... I don't understand why they don't help their own people. Or I guess Cambodia, I don't know. Do they sell any? What's their biggest output?
They have, I would say, they're only just now back on their feet after like they had this terrible Khmer Rouge period,
of course,
the Vietnam War, then they had Civil War. And
I was going to ask you, were you ever scared there?
Yeah, I was. It's much safer now. But when I was there originally, I originally went there in 2002 and then went again.
But that's only 18 years ago.
Yeah. It was there and it was like the poverty there was crushing and the crime was bad and it was very dangerous. I mean, there were a couple times where I remember I found myself on the back of some guy they have these moto dupes. That's basically like a motorcycle taxi driver.
Yeah.
And we're like flying through some dirt road in the middle of the night on the way. He's taking me to this place he's told me about, and I realized he could just waste me right here. Yeah. No one would ever find me, you know. So there were a lot of these things.
And you stick out like a sort of...
exactly. Yeah.
I mean, you're taller. How tall are you?
I'm 6'1".
Oh my God! You're like the tallest white guy.
Yeah,
you're super white.
Yeah, they all thought I was a missionary, that I had come there to spread the good news about Jesus, and I was actually teaching Buddhism at the Buddhist Institute.
Oh my God,
that's very funny.
But did you ever feel? Did anyone threaten you?
No one threatened me. Like no one. Like brandished a knife at me. There were a couple situations where I felt like I went to this guy's house one time and he said, "Can you throw a punch?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, theoretically." And he's like, "Because I got some guys coming over here and there was a drug deal and it went bad and you might have to, you know, it could get ugly." And I remember that was really nerve-wracking. And I had a guide there at the time. And these guys came in and they were hot. And I thought, oh, this is going to get bad. And it turned out then that one of the guys knew the guide that I was with. And that smoothed it over right away.
Come on.
Yeah.
Oh
so there are situations like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do that shit now because I have a kid. But back then, I was willing.
So, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm scared to go to... I'm a total wuss when it comes to like... I'll probably never go to Africa, ever.
Really? Oh, there's some great
scared.
stuff.
I don't know. You know, you have to watch the Joe Rogan with... What's the artist's name? The Korean artist. Andy.
Cho.
Yeah,
David
Cho. He goes to Africa, like... in the 90s, and he has no cell phone before cell phones or anything, and like he gets lost in a jungle with another guy. You got to hear these stories. You would not believe it. This guy was out of his mind.
Really?
Yeah, like crazy.
Well, I'll check it out.
He heard that there was like a dinosaur there, and he went to try to find this dinosaur. And like he didn't know anything about the country. He just went there. He snuck into the country. He wasn't supposed to be there in Rwanda.
Yeah, he's doing it all wrong.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it.
Anyway, I'm just a little fearful when there's desperation, I guess, is what I'm saying in countries.
That's smart. Yeah.
Yeah. I just love America because it's so safe. Like,
well,
well, yeah, I guess. Yeah. Well, you know what's funny? My accountant, he's this older Greek guy, and he's like, you know, I saw the rioting in Greece a few years ago, and he's like, that's like a third world country. That'll never happen here in America.
Oh, wow.
You know, and look what happened.
Yeah, it's true. Who would have predicted the year we've just had? It's remarkable.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
I guess our time's kind of up.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is it?
It's about 3 o'clock. You got to go?
Yeah, I got to go. 5 minutes, and then I got to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
But listen, I appreciate you coming in so much. I had a great time talking with you. And I'm glad you actually came in and we didn't do it on Zoom.
I agree.
And,
this is much better.
Yeah. And I hope you had fun.
I did, yeah.
I always like learning from a mind like yours, and, it's just you've read so much and you've studied so many different philosophers and stuff, and it's really fun to listen to. So thanks for coming in, Steve. I really
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay, take care.
Take care.